नमस्कार, आप सभी का IAS भारत में स्वागत है। हमारे फ्री क्रैश कोर्स को ज्वाइन करने के लिए गूगल फॉर्म को फिल करें जो कि नीचे डिस्क्रिप्शन बॉक्स में दिया गया है। धन्यवाद।
Hello everyone, I am Rohin Kumar, rank 39 this year. So in this series of lectures with IAS Bharat, I welcome you all in this lecture of General Studies Paper 1, where we would be discussing some of the questions and concepts related to Indian society. So we will follow the approach of do not miss series that is there with IAS Bharat, wherein we will discuss the key concept of society that are asked by UPSC repeatedly, and these key concepts would be discussed in a format of questions and answers, so that we will have an idea about the concepts as well as how we can sort of present them in the examination. So we will take this approach from here. So the first concept that we would be discussing today, it is the idea of secularism. So we all know that that our Indian constitution, it lays great emphasis on the principles of secularism. Earlier it was an implicit principle, and later it was made explicit by the Amendment Act of 1976, which is the 42nd Amendment Act of 1976, wherein the word secular was included in the preamble of Indian Constitution. So we would be discussing the key aspects of secularism, what is the concept of secularism, how questions are framed on the topic of secularism. So let us start with this thing. So the first question that we have is, just to give you a brief context about the nature of lecture that we would be having. So we will discuss around 8 to 10 questions on each of the topics that are there in the Indian society, wherein we would try to cover all the aspects and dimensions that are there with respect to each one of the concepts that we would be discussing. Okay. So starting with the idea of secularism. So the question is, how do the Indian debates on secularism differ from the debates in the West? So it is said that India has its own model of secularism from the ancient times. Our understanding with respect to the idea of secularism, it is very ancient, and it has been there in the past as well in India. But we have seen that certain developments in the Western worlds during the Renaissance and post-Renaissance period, we have seen that the idea of secularism have also come up into the Western nations. But there is a key difference between the idea of secularism in the West vis-a-vis the idea of secularism in the Indian context. So that can be seen from the cultural differences that are there, from the societal differences that are there in the societies of West and India. So based upon these cultural peculiarities and social realities, which are very different in both the areas, we would see certain differences. So this is one of the key areas upon which UPSC generally forms a question, the idea of secularism and its difference with respect to the West and with respect to the Indian context. So first, what could be the basic approach or structure to answer this question? That would be, we have already discussed that when we approach a question, we follow the framework, IBC framework it is called, which is intro, body, followed by conclusion. Within body, we will discuss one or two dimensions. Let us say 2 dimensions here, and within that, whichever aspect we have to be discussed, that we will get an idea from the question and the nature of directive words that are there. Okay. So this is the basic framework that we will follow. So introduction basically includes definitions, certain data points, or some other key concept that could be included here. Okay. So in context of this question, we will start with the idea of secularism, because secularism is the key theme of this question. Okay. So introduction is something that addresses the central idea or the key theme of any question that is there. Okay. We'll start with the definition of secularism. that secularism defines the relationship between religion and state. In India, it evolved as a context-specific model of principled distance, which was described by Rajiv Bhargav, differing from the Western notions of strict separation. So we have got a basic idea here that the difference between, so the question focuses upon the difference between the secular model of India and the secular model of the West, and we address that particular thing here with a key definition in the very initial, that what is secularism. The idea of secularism is this only, that the separation between the religion or the religious things and the state. And we can also say that in public life, that how much role does religion plays in lives of the people is something that can be connoted or correlated with the idea of secularism. And there is a difference between the two. So when we see with respect to West and with respect to we will understand this thing with a very basic diagram. So we are moving on to the next part, which is the main body part of this question. So we have started the question with the definition of secularism, that the separation between the state and the religion is something that is called as the secularism, and it has been defined by Rajiv Bhargav. Rajiv Bhargav discusses the idea of principled distance with respect to the Indian context. So let me explain this with a very simple diagram that we generally see in context of India and in context of West. In context of West. So you can approach this question that how does this debate of secularism is there in the West and in. So with respect to India, we will see, we can represent with this diagram. This is religion and this is state. So this is a basic diagram that explains the idea or the degree of confluence between the state and the religion with respect to India. And the model, Western model, it can be represented in this form, that this is religion and this is state. So there is a strict separation that we are seeing between the religion and the state. That state does not intervene in the matters of the religion, and the religious bodies, religious texts or religious principles, rituals, or anything that is related to religion, it does not interfere or involve in the matters of the state, in the matters of governance, in the matters of polity affairs, or anything that relates to the political nature of any state. It does not intervene. They are strictly separated from each other. However, when we see that in case of India, there is a confluence that exists between the two. We see that this area that overlaps, it shows that how religion is having an impact by the state, as well as the state is having an impact upon the religion. But as the idea of Rajiv Bhargav, it says a principled distance. It is not that they interfere heavily in matters of each other, and also it is there that they are strictly separated. There is a principled distance. There is a caution that is exercised both by the religious sphere as well as the state sphere, that there exists a line between the two. There is a very thin line that is respected by both the spheres in context of India. Both the models have their own advantages and disadvantages, the pros and cons that we can discuss. So the question talks about the nature of debate that exists with respect to secularism. So India and West, we will see the first thing that is there. First point is separation versus engagement. that how much they separate. We have already discussed. You can make these diagrams in your answer copies, which will enhance your presentation as well, and the idea would be conveyed very easily. You don't have to struggle and juggle so much to express this idea. So the first point would be separation versus engagement. We see that in the West there is a clear separation between the church and the state. USA, France. India engages with the religion of reform and welfare. So this is a key aspect that exists in the Indian model of secularism, that the state intervenes. It does not interfere. It intervenes in the religious matter to the extent, since India, the Indian state acts in the spirit of a welfare state, it exercises a control to such an extent that it impacts the lives of the people. So religion is a social reality that we cannot deny. So if there exist certain practices or certain evils in the sphere of religion, then in context of India, the state assumes it to be necessary that it intervenes and bring out certain reforms, bring out certain changes into the religious sphere, so that lives of the people, it could progress, they could do certain developments. And we see that in form of certain reforms or that are taking place in the religious spheres, be it the triple talaq that was there, because there the old practices, certain practices in certain religions, they exist from long times, and we see that they impact certain principles of the constitution. Our idea of state or the constitution, it premises on certain values which are there in the Indian society. The primary ones being equality. We see it relies upon fraternity, and these terms they are defined very well in the constitution. So the Indian state intervenes to such an extent that these constitutional values, they are not compromised, and we as a society progress as a result of this. So this become first point, that the nature of engagement between the state and the religion, which is clear separation, as well as there is a certain principled intervention that exists in case of India. Second is the nature, how it is called, negative versus positive secularism. So the Western countries, they follow the model of negative secularism, which means that they do not intervene in the religious matters. They do not interfere in the matters of the church. It is upon the church that how they conduct the religious life of the people, how they preach, how they propagate the ideas of religion, and state does not have a say into that. However, in case of India, as we have discussed, that there are certain interventions which are directed towards bringing out certain reforms, bringing out certain welfare ideas into the religious sphere, so that certain basic principles of human life that are embedded in our constitution, they are not compromised. Okay, that's why it is called as positive secularism. Positive secularism, you can also represent this with respect to diagrams, that our model is of positive secularism and it is the negative model of secularism. How negative? Because it can be seen certain form of regression that takes place, that there is certain element of rigidity, that both of them would not intervene into each other's matter, despite knowing that the state might be breaching certain principles which can be taken from the religious sphere, and the church sometimes accesses to such level even after knowing that the state does not have a say into that. Okay. Third point that comes is the public role of religion. So as we have discussed, that the idea of secularism, it exists at two levels. First is how much is the degree of separation between the state and the religion, and second, in the lives of the people as well, how much role does religion plays. This can also be connected to the idea of secularism, that what role and how much conduct of the people is directed by the religious matters or the religious institution that exist in society. So we see that in case of West, we see that religion is purely a private matter. It is people who decide that what religion they would opt for. It is people who decide that how and to what extent they would be following certain religious practices, how much they would abide by the dictates or by the directions of the church or other religious institutions. The religion does not intervene into the private lives of the people. However, in case of India, that religion is visible in the public sphere. In Western countries, we can see that people, they do not propagate ideas in such a manner that they are reflected into the public life or in the public sphere, like the religious symbolism that might exist in some of the countries. However, that we see in case of the Indian model of secularism, that it is visible in the public life, the festivals that we celebrate, the clothing that is there, the certain food habits that are associated with certain religions. Though the society is becoming more and more fluid, it is becoming more acculturated in the sense that these concepts, they are coming together and people are taking it as more of a way of living, as a concept of life than certain rigid principles. So we can say that in the conventional sense, the Indian model, in the Indian model of secularism, we see certain religious elements, certain religious attributes that are reflected into the public sphere in forms of festivals, in form of certain religious institutions that exist. Okay. The next dimension that we will touch upon is what are the contextual differences between the two, because we are basically discussing a debate on the secularism models of both the West and the India. So if we see that how these differences are created, so we have discussed this in the very initial of this question, that these ideas, they are differed because of different social realities, because of different cultural attributes and cultural realities of both the regions. We can trace it first in the historical background of both India and West. It is a reaction to church dominance. We have seen that before the Reformation period that was there in the Western countries or European countries, around 15th or 16th century, we have seen that church used to play a major role into the lives of the people. What people would be doing on day-to-day basis, how their days would be conducted, what would be their lifestyles, what would be their life choices, everything was conducted and it was dictated by church only. The dominance of the church in the lives of the people, it was to a very great level. And as a result of that, there was certain degradation that was observed in case of Europe. We have seen that the dark ages that existed before the Reformation period or before the Renaissance period, that was result of the church only. Why I am saying that was a result of the church only? Because certain evils have started coming up due to the one-sided dominance of the church into the lives of the people. Those institutions, they became so opaque, they became so strong and dominant into the society that people, the voices of the people, they used to be suppressed and they would not be considered in that manner. So the dominance of the church, it started impacting the lives of the people, and as a result to that, when changes started taking place, it is first the church that was taken that was confronted as the first unit, and the institutions that were there with the church, they were confronted by the people. And we see that this strict separation, it is as a result of this only. We have seen that before the Renaissance period, the state, it would be dictated by the church only. We would see that even though there were political institutions that existed, but they were not functioning in an independent manner. It was the church who would decide most of the things for them. Okay. So it was this dominance which led to people adopting a model gradually, that there will be strict separation, church will not have any role into their lives. When we see that in case of India, managing deep religious diversity post-partition. So we know that compared to the Western nations, India is a country with huge cultural, social diversities. We see that India is a mosaic of different cultures, mosaic of different social customs, different social realities, different social traditions, cultural practices that came together when the idea of state or the idea of nation evolved after partition into India. So there were different groups that came together. It is at this stage that we adopted this model, where when different communities, they are coming together, we will evolve a model where the religious and cultural practices of the people, they would be safeguarded, as well as the state would be given such a role or such a position where it will have some authority by which it can intervene. Why the state would intervene here? It will intervene because the state wants to create a cohesive society. The state wanted to create a society that does not have many cultural and social differences, protecting their cultural practices. The social differences, they do not inflate to such a position that it impacts the unity of the country. It impacts the integrity of the nation. So it is as a result of this that state was given such a role that it can intervene into certain aspects of the religious life of the people. Okay. And we have seen that the mayhem that was seen during the partition period, millions of people died as a result of the cultural and social conflicts that took place, that it was deemed fit that the state should take a position where it would direct certain aspects of religious life. Okay. Second difference that we see is with respect to the legal frameworks. So we are discussing the differences. Indian Constitution, it includes articles from Article 25 to 28, which ensures the religious freedom into the lives of the people. The basic fundamental right, it was included as part of these fundamental rights. The freedom to express their religion, the freedom to profess their religion. So this freedom was given in Articles 25 to 28. However, there were certain scopes that were left within this only, that the state can intervene in certain matters. We see that with respect to cultural institutions or religious institutions, that state can direct as to what would be the nature of it. Also, the state will make such a distance that all the religious institutions or the religions, the state will have an equal distance from this. We can express this with this example, that this is the state and it will maintain equal distance from all the religions, both with respect to the interventions, both with respect to how much it is going to impact its institutions and conduct. Okay. We can also cite as part of the value addition that how in the post-independent India, how this concept of secularism have also evolved, that we see with respect to the judicial interpretations that have come up after the independence. First, we see the S.R. Bommai case. Also, there was an important judgment of Sirur Mutt that was there in the 1950s only, in the initials of it, which brought up the doctrine of essentiality, that there are certain practices which are very essential or which are very integral to the existence of a religion. So this doctrine of essentiality that was brought in, it was brought in with the idea that there are certain religious practices or customs which goes against the basic constitutional principles. So the state, or as an extension to that, the judiciary, it will have a role upon defining as to what are the things which are very important with respect to the existence of a religion, which would be described as the essential practices, and what are the certain practices which will not be essentials. So when this non-essential part of certain religious practices that are creating some sort of discrimination between different communities of religion, they would be eliminated in such a manner that we are in a position, or we are in a command, that we create a society where certain principles of constitution, they would be safeguarded. In S.R. Bommai case, which was very monumental case in the judicial history of India, which dealt with the federal features and other aspects, it also included secularism as the basic structure of the constitution. And we all know that it is the basic features or the basic structure of the constitution which cannot be altered even after a constitutional amendment, because these basic features, they forms the philosophy and the conscience of Indian constitution. So discarding them or eliminating them means that the conscience or the soul of the Indian constitution has been impacted. So it is the judiciary that protects this aspect. Okay. Second, we have all seen the monumental judgment in the Saira Bano case in 2017, which is famously called as the triple talaq judgment, that the talaq-e-biddat. So there were different types of talaqs, within which there was a practice of talaq-e-biddat. Talaq-e-biddat, it said that when a person utters 3 times talaq, 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 they are in a position that they eliminate or they terminate a marriage. So it was perceived as a social evil, that how can you, without providing any sense of security or any sense of safety, that you could do such an act. So it was against the basic principles, and the manner in which this practice was going on, it was discriminatory against the female sections of the society of a certain religion, as a result of which the triple talaq judgment that came in 2017, it has done away and criminalized this particular practice, that it is very discriminatory in nature and it goes against the basic principles of the constitution. So this was a reformist intervention that was there, and we have seen in case of S.R. Bommai case that the principle was reiterated as a basic feature of the constitution. And in the Saira Bano case or the Shah Bano case that was there in 1987, we have seen that it was taken as a reform within a particular religion. So it is this nature of Indian model of secularism, that it goes and intervene into certain aspects of religious practices that exist. When we have discussed about the contextual differences, we would briefly go on the issues as well. So, what are the issues that exist with respect to the secularism model? So we will discuss certain issues and criticisms of this model, which is selective intervention. So there are when we are debating around this topic, when we are discussing these particular aspects, we see that it is seen that it is the state that decides which are the portions which have to be intervened and which are not. So this there can be a certain natural bias or perceived bias against certain practices in in the government of the day. So it has been there that certain allegations have been there with respect to the nature of model of Indian secularism, which has been described as pseudo secularism. Pseudo secularism, why? Because the concept of secularism that formally began into the West, though the idea had existed in India from centuries only, but the formalization of the concept, it says that there has to be a separation between the two units. However, when we see that in case of India, that there is certain nature of overlap that exists between the two, and it is because of this overlap that there is no concretization of this concept that has taken place, as a result of which it has been called as the pseudo secularism. So these are issues, they in themselves do not declare the model as of pseudo nature. It is just that when we are analyzing the model, when we are evaluating the nature of this model, we see that it has been described as pseudo. Second is the communal politics that has evolved, because religion has been a key reality of Indian society, and we have seen that in certain aspects it has been used as a tool of electoral mobilization as well in the country. We have seen this, that this religious institution, people from these religious institutions, they command huge respect into the society, and that impacts the electoral choices of the people, as a result of which the nature of Indian politics, it has been perceived to be of certain nature of communalism that had crept in. We have seen that from our independence days only, that how on religious lines people have made their political choices. So that is another issue that is highlighted. We have discussed the key differences. We have discussed how these differences have existed, what are the issues, what were the important judicial interventions that were taken within this debate, what is the significance of the Indian model of secularism. First is pluralism, that it accommodates the multiple faiths. We know that in case of India being a very diverse society, where the religious diversity, and within the religions as well, the cultural diversity that exists in different parts of the country, it is very huge, and there are large number of faiths, people belonging to different faiths, people practicing different festivals, different cultural activities that we see in case of northern India, in case of the southern parts of the country, or the eastern India, western parts of the country. We have seen that there are innumerable cultural practices that exist in case of India. So this model of Indian secularism, as we have discussed, that when we intended to create a society where we would all be living happy together, the principle of fraternity that has been highlighted in the preamble of the Constitution, it brings out this basic thing only. So it is one advantage or significance of Indian model of secularism, that it brings together the multiple faiths. Second is the social reform. So the reformist idea of Indian model of secularism, it has allowed us, it has given us that space within which, when certain generations, they realize that certain practices that have existed in the past, they are discriminatory in nature, they goes against certain sections of the society, certain sections. So it is at this point of time that these people, they can exercise the power and authority and take down or and do away with certain practices which goes against certain basic human principles. So it gives us that chance to bring out those changes into the society. It gives us that opportunity by which certain reforms can be conducted into the society. Okay. So it is progressive in nature in that sense. Reform measures. What reforms can be taken from here? When we are discussing that, we have discussed certain aspects, that what are the key differences, what were the contextual differences, that what as a result of which these models have evolved. We have discussed the key judgments. We have also discussed the issues. We have discussed the significance of Indian model. Now we are discussing that what could be the reforms or the measures or the way ahead from here. Because the model of secularism that has come up into India, it is still in a state of evolution. It is still regenerating itself. It is bringing certain new aspects to it every day when we see it. So, what could be certain changes that could be brought in? What could be the certain measures that could be brought in? One is the uniform application of laws, because it has been a criticism as well that the Indian model, in case of Indian model, there is selective intervention or selective interference that takes place. So to do away with this selective nature, the application of laws with respect to certain religious practices, it can be uniform in nature. So if there is certain law with respect to, let us say, with respect to women, for instance, defining the marriage age of women in India, then this law should be made applicable across the communities and across the religions. There should not be left any space with respect to as to these are the communities which will not be included and these are the communities that will be included. So this uniform, the nature of uniform application, it has to be brought in. Second is that it should promote the constitutional morality. Our constitution has certain principles which exist at the core of it, which relates and which promotes the basic human life. It protects certain natural rights of humans. So it should, the principles of the secularism in India, it should promote this constitutional morality. All the principles of the constitution that existed as its core values, they should be protected. There is a morality that has come up as a result of our constitution. So it is this morality that has to be protected, both in sense of that certain communities, their faith would be protected, people's faith would be protected, and there will be certain elements of uniformity that would be there. So the ultimate aim is to create a society where people coexist, where people are able to exercise their natural rights, where people are able to reach to the zenith of their natural potential, and they are able to live a dignified life. So it is this. So as part of the conclusion, we can say that it differs fundamentally from the Western model by combining respect with reform. So this is a very good term that we are seeing in case of India. First term was by Bhargav, which talked about principal distance. Now second is this respect with reform, that we are ready to reform the old practices or the redundant practices that have come up as certain social ills or certain social evils. We are ready to reform them as well. However, with respect, we would maintain that basic dignity and respect for the communities that are there. Strengthening its balanced and impartial application is crucial for sustaining pluralism and diversity of the country. So it is very important with respect to India that any model which evolve as part of the social or cultural or religious reality, it should include in its all the elements that exist into the Indian society. So this was a debate on the secularism part. Second question that can be asked. So we have had a good discussion on the secularism part, that what it is, what are its negatives, what are the differences with respect to West, how this concept have evolved into India, what were the primary intentions around which this model in India has evolved, how certain judicial pronouncements, they have also impacted this concept. Okay. Now we would be discussing other aspects of secularism. As a result, we will see other aspects which are generally framed as a question with respect to secularism. Indian secularism is based on principled distance rather than strict separation. Assess its role in managing communal diversity. So the question talks about, first we will understand the question, then we will proceed as to what are the things that can be included. First is that Indian secularism is based on principled distance rather than strict separation. So we have to discuss the idea of principled distance into the introduction. We can briefly define what is secularism, because we will see it as a separate question. There will be one question that will be there in the examination. We will be discussing around 5 to 7 questions here. However, in examination, you will see only one question. So try to briefly bring out in 1 or 1.5 line that you are bringing the idea of secularism initially. Then what you will do is you will discuss the idea of principled distance that has been there in the question. Okay. This follows the idea of principled distance, where state engages with religion to ensure equality rather than strict separation, as articulated by Rajiv Bhargav. It allows flexible state intervention to manage diversity. So the principled distance, the nature of this principle is that it allows that room and space to the state that it can very constructively engage with the religion. It can very constructively intervene with certain degree of flexibility. It is able to intervene into the state, because this is done, we have discussed it already, to manage the diversity of the country. Because if there is a strict separation that exists with respect to the state and religion in India, we will see that all this the different social groups or the cultural groups that exist in India, they will become very rigid about their principles, and they will form their own ghettos or silos. Let us say there are 4 religious or cultural groups in the country. If they are very rigid, and if there exists no agency into the country which can bring about certain changes, and bring about certain changes by which all these religious group can agree upon certain principles like the national unity, the integrity of the nation. Because if they are rigid in their approach, why would they care about of a united country or a united society? Because they are happy in preserving their own religious practices, their customs, their different aspects of their religion. So it is as a result of this that state has been given certain degree of the certain space by which it can intervene into the religious affairs. Okay. So what are the features of principled distance? So is based on rather than strict separation. So we have to discuss this idea, that how the idea of principled distance rather than strict separation, it is able to manage the diversity in the country. Because we all know that we have to manage the diversity in the nation. We cannot simply bring about laws, bring about certain principles which are so uniform in nature that they crumbles the basic practices of each of the cultural groups that are there. Okay. So what are the principles of this principled distance? First is contextual engagement, abolition of untouchability. So we have discussed that it is the basic natural human rights of the people that would be protected when state is having or intervening into the lives of the people. So first is the contextual engagement of the state. That state would intervene in only those aspects where it is seen that certain basic principles, like in case of temple entry, we have seen that in case of temple entry, the very popular Sabrimala event of Kerala, where we have seen that a section of population, which is women, they have not been given entry into the temples. And this was going against the principles of equality. It is the gendered discrimination that existed into those practices. So the state deemed it fit, the state or the judiciary, it deemed it fit that such practices which are regressive in nature, they should be taken down from the society, so that people do not have to suffer and they are able to exercise their lives with dignity. So it is the contextual engagement that is very important with respect to the engagement. Equal respect for all religions. So the state would act in such a spirit and such a nature that it will not have any biases, it will not have any partial attitude towards any of the religions. All the religions, they would be seen from an equal distance, they would be seen from a uniform eye, wherein all the religious institutions or practices, they would be sort of assessed in a very impartial manner. And equal respect, no official religion, protection under 25 to 28. So article number 25 to 28, which gives the religious freedom, that goes for each sections of the society. It is not that it is only applicable for the Christian religion or for the Hindu religion. It goes for all the citizens of the nation. So the state, when it sees people, it sees them as the citizen of a country, not as people belonging to certain certain religions. So it is having equal respect to all the religions. It will not have any official religion. It will not. The constitution made it very clear that India does not have a state religion. State will not favor any particular religion. It will protect and preserve all the religions. It will have respect and dignity for all the religions. Next is the reform-oriented secularism, that the state would act against the discriminatory practices rather than choosing practices from certain religions. It will maintain that basic dignity for all the religions. Flexible neutrality, neither strict separation nor theocracy. So theocracy is something when a state is run by religious institutions. This is that religion is running the state. Second is that there is a strict separation. So India follows neither of them. We have already discussed this thing in very detail, that India follows neither of them. It sees certain elements that are coming together from both these things, that religion and state are having an impact on each one of them. So this is first dimension, that after describing the principal distance, you will discuss the features of principal distance. Then we will discuss the second part of the question, that how it manages the communal diversity within the country. First thing is accommodation of the pluralism. Personal laws allows cultural autonomy to different communities. So despite having certain laws which are overarching in nature, which are applicable to all the sections of the society, there would be certain laws which are there for certain religions. They would also be protected. So it is these certain practices or laws which exist in certain religions which will be given space, because it is this idea of pluralism, that the plural ideas or the different ideas that different communities have, they will also be provided a space under the larger framework of secularism that we follow. That we will have our national laws which would be applicable across the religious sections. However, the religions can also have certain personal laws which would conduct certain aspects of their living, like laws related to adoption, certain bylaws or certain principles which are there with respect to marriages. So Indian constitution provides that space that certain religions, in the name of preserving their cultural identities, in the name of preserving the cultural peculiarities of a particular religion, these religious practices, they would be given space in form of personal laws. Second is conflict mediation. We have seen that when there are communal tensions in the country, when the different social groups that exist in the society, so as a result of certain conflicts or certain frictions that might come into the society, the state plays the role of a mediator. The extension units of the state, which is the basic administration, the people from the civil services, for instance, you guys, when you will be into the civil services, you would be given these key opportunities that you have to bring that caution into the different social groups. You will be given this responsibility that when there are certain tensions into the society, it is you who would bring out or sort of tone down those tensions. You would bring these different groups together as a unit. So it is these interventions which sort of tone down the communal tensions that exist in society. Next is the judicial reinforcement. That judiciary as a unit of governance in the country, which have high regards in the mind of the people, and it also checks certain institutions of certain power institutions. It provides that balance between the society. It provides that balance into the government as well. So the basic work of judiciary is to protect the rights of the people and keep those in power into check. So when judiciary acts in that spirit, it also acts with respect to the idea of religion as well. That judiciary acts from an impartial nature. It does not have any biases when it functions. So what happens is that as a result of certain judicial decisions, it reinforces certain principles which are applicable across the religions. So it keeps in check the society, it keeps in check the government institutions that are there, so they do not act in a biased manner. Next is policy examples. Okay. So we have seen that how this principal distance, it manages the communal diversity that exists into the country, that it accommodates the plurality of the society. It gives space to all the sections. Next is that it mediates if there is a conflict that takes place in the society. Okay. Whenever we are writing an answer, we have to keep this thing in mind that your answer have to be balanced. Whenever you are given an opportunity to write an answer, you have to keep in mind that when you are, let us say, when you are highlighting the pros of a topic, then you'll also have to bring out certain cons or certain disadvantages of that concept or of that topic. So when we are discussing about principled distance, we would be doing similar exercise, that when we have discussed that how it manages the communal diversity into the society, there are certain issues that also exist with respect to this concept. So what are these issues? Perception of selective intervention. We have discussed it earlier as well, that when state intervenes in case of India, there are certain allegations that are imposed which says that the interventions, the nature and the frequency of interventions that exist, it is of such nature that it is perceived to be very selective, that the state units or the different units of the government, they act in a very partial and selective manner, and it appears to be of a nature that it is appeasing certain communities. So there are certain element of bias that exist with respect to this principled distance, because it is the application of certain principles that we get to decide whether this is fair or not. So this is one criticism that we have seen that in case of vote bank politics as well. So we know that the how much religion and the cultural practices, how much big role they play into the lives of the people. So when the political parties, they mobilize people for voting, when they for electoral polity, when these religious groups are mobilized, there exists certain sense of misuse that exists as a result of that the political institutions or units of the government, they are utilized in a manner that they seems to be misusing some of them for certain political gains. So it is next criticism that is there. Legal inconsistencies. So this is a big debate that goes on, that we have included that in Article 44 of the Constitution, that the Uniform Civil Code, it would be made applicable across the country. But there are still debates that are going on. So there are certain legal inconsistencies that despite having some overarching principles guiding us that we have to implement Uniform Civil Code, we are not able to reach a stage where we are able to concretize our efforts in such a manner that we are able to sort of convince or persuade the different sections of the society that these principles of UCC, they will not go against them. It is the principles of UCC that will enhance the lives of the people. So it is these legal inconsistencies, and we have seen that in India, Goa and Uttarakhand Goa was the first state, now Uttarakhand also. These are the two states which are having their uniform civil codes. So Uttarakhand have a law on UCC that was brought a couple of years back only. So in some parts of the country we have a law, in some parts of the country, which is a larger part of the country, we do not have a law on UCC. So it is in itself a debate whether there should be a uniform law or not. But we are discussing that when we are talking about principled distance, and there are allegations of biases, there are allegations of selective interpretation of these principles. So it is at this point that this particular debate also comes into picture. Next is that despite having that, we started with the basic idea that we want to bring the different sections of the society together, and it is because of this idea that we have brought in the Indian model of secularism, that the state has also been given certain powers. So we see that despite of having that, we see that there are certain communal conflicts that exist into the society. We see that certain examples can be cited, the Babri Masjid demolition, which have highlighted that the communal nature of the society, which is coming out as a result of different perceived opinions of their cultural practices. These conflicts are taking place. There are other innumerable communal conflicts that have taken place into the country. So it brings that clarion call whether this concept of principled distance have functioned well or not. Okay. So after discussing the principles, after discussing the challenges of it, now we will discuss what are the reforms that can be brought up into this principle, so that the issues that have been highlighted earlier, they can be taken care of. Strengthen institutional neutrality. So this would be the first thing to start with, because it is the state units or the institutions that largely guide this whole thing. So when we talk about the institutional neutrality, it will bring that selective nature, or the selective application of those principle. So when there is neutrality into the institution, so that selective appeasement that was highlighted earlier, it will not be taken into consideration for impartial governance. That there has to be, because many of the police laws that exist into our country, many of the judicial laws that exist into our society, it is because of the colonial legacy, that there is a large hangover from the colonial times. So the reforms within these laws and have to be brought up in such a nature that it reflects the social realities of the contemporary times. We as a society has evolved post independence. We have started living together. We have largely followed the principles of fraternity. However, there are certain points when we see certain conflicts taking place into the society. So there is a need that these things are taken into care, and the reforms are brought up in such a manner that certain caution could be seen into the society. Second is promoting the constitutional morality. We have discussed this idea earlier as well, that how certain morals or certain key principles of the constitution, which protects the natural rights of the people, they have to be promoted. Fraternity, scientific temper. So when scientific temper is promoted into the society, the rationality of the society, it increases. The logical reasoning of the society with respect to the practices that existed in the past, it will also come into the forefront. We will see that when these principles are exercised, when people are questioning certain practices into the society, we will see that there would be certain elements from the current state of the society, or from the current psychological state of the society, that let us take an example here, that compared to a society 100 years back, when people from today's society are given this opportunity that you have to frame certain let us say laws for the society, then there, as a result of technology, as a result of development of scientific temper into the society, we will see that people will agree upon certain principles. Despite belonging to different religious groups, people will agree upon certain principles, like principles of equality, like principles of dignity for women. This might not have been the case 100 years back if we would have brought similar set of people from different religions for making laws vis-a-vis people from the contemporary times. So the social realities also change. So there is a need for that as well. Gradual legal harmonization in personal laws and ensuring gender justice. We have seen that when we talk about the personal laws, we have seen that these personal laws, they have largely evolved from such a time when the social realities were different, when we have seen that the gender realities were different. Certain gender of the society, they were not given equal and dignified space into the resource control of the society, into how the society into the decision making of the society. So this reality has evolved and changed over a period of time. So there is a need that certain degree of harmonization should also be brought in. Okay. Next is civic engagement, interfaith dialogue and inclusive education. It is very important because when we see that different social groups exist, we also see certain instances of communal tensions and communal conflicts that goes into the society. So there is a need that certain conclaves are held where people coming from different faith, they are given space, they are given some room of discussion where they are able to meet their perceived differences, because it is very clear that the tensions start when people perceive a particular thing differently. Let us say if there's a fight between two friends, then it is because of their different perceptions that that fight might be starting. Let us say if someone is quarreling on a particular thing, two friends are quarreling, then they might be quarreling because one person thinks that this was the reality of this particular situation or thing. The other person would be thinking that this is there's a different reality of that. So it is these perceived differences that leads to certain conflicts into the society. So there is a need that all these institutions, they are brought together. We have discussed, just to give you a framework quickly, introduction about principal distance, then main body. Main body, we had 3 dimensions. First was the features, second was the criticism of it, third was the way ahead, and at the end of it we see conclusion. So this is a very balanced answer where we are seeing that all the aspects of it, they are covered very well. Okay, you can conclude it that how it remains as a principle, as a vital principle for India's managing the India's complex diversity, and though it needs certain changes due to the changing social realities, and it needs to be more clear and more concretized so that there are no confusion that might be existing. Okay. Next question is, Indian secularism is not based on strict separation but on contextual engagement with religion. Critically examine. We have discussed, I will go very quickly now, because we have discussed the idea from 4 to 5 different dimensions in detail. So we would be moving ahead very quickly here, though we would be touching all the important points, but we would be with respect to the elaboration and explanation part, we would skip certain sections because there is no need to repeat the things again and again. So again, the question is that it is not based on strict separation but on contextual engagement with religion. Critically examine it. So first is, again, we will discuss, because Indian secularism is the key theme or the central theme of this question. So we will start the introduction with Indian secularism only, where we are seeing that it departs from the conventional concept in the West and allows the state to engage with religion to uphold equality and reform. Again, we will bring out the idea of Rajiv Bhargav here, that how principled distance as a concept in India has shaped the different reality of secularism in India. Okay, what are the features that how there is a contextual engagement that exists into the Indian model of secularism? First thing is the reform-oriented intervention. We see that state intervenes into certain realities of the religions. It takes down certain religious practices sometimes if that is needed. We have seen that there's a law against the triple talaq, where it has been perceived to be as a criminal offense, as a social evil that needs to be eliminated from the society. So it is the reform-oriented interventions of the Indian secularism that is removing certain social evils. Second is equal respect principle, that the articles, the fundamental right of freedom of religion, it guarantees that all the peoples, all the citizens of the country will have the opportunity to express, propagate and profess their own religion, and that is guaranteed under the constitutional articles without any discrimination, without giving any privilege to any section of the society. Third is the flexible neutrality. State may support or regulate the religious institution when required. So we have seen that state, when if that is needed, we have seen that certain, we will take the example of Parsis, because that is a community that was largely a trading community that existed in the western coast of India, largely concentrated in parts of Mumbai. So we have seen that there was a major population decline that was seen within this community. So it existed for a long time in the cultural reality of the country, that the state deemed it fit that we would promote the population decline that is happening into the. So there is a scheme as well, I think GeoParsi. So there's a scheme as well that exists, which sort of provides certain incentives to the people of Parsi community, that their population does not decline into the country. So it is this flexible neutrality that if there is need, when certain religious institutions, they need certain help from the state, that as a result of its very flexible nature, though a principal distance, it provides that help to those institutions. State management of temples versus protection of minority institution. We all know that under Article 30, it protects the minority institutions, that the lands of minority institutions, they cannot be taken. And also these minority institutions, they will have their own practices of how they conduct different parts of their lifestyles or life choices. So it provides us that space to the minority institutions, by which they simply are not any disadvantage, and they are promoted in that sense. So first part, we have seen that how this Indian secularism, it is not strict separation and it provides certain engagement. Next is significance in Indian context, that what is the significance of this particular principle, that it engages very contextually because it manages diversity. So these points, once you have gone through, let us say when we would be revising all the 4 to 5 points, we would reach a stage when all the 5 to 7 questions that will be there on secularism, they will start connecting to each other. We have discussed as a question, a complete question, that how principled distance it manages the communal diversity in the country. And now when we are discussing about contextual engagement with respect to the Indian model of secularism, we are seeing that it manages diversity. So these things, when you will start understanding them properly, you will see that certain connections are established there. So first, it manages diversity. Second, it promotes social reform. We have seen that if the Indian model of secularism, it is functioning properly, so it was intended to promote certain reforms into different religious groups. Because if we allow the rigidities to inflate beyond a point, we will see that these rigidities, they might survive, but at the cost of unity and integrity of the nation. So it is the unity of the nation and society which is a principle that overrides the other principles. So we have to protect that principle, and in that we have to bring out certain reforms into the different units that are there, so that they are able to reach a stage where they agree upon certain common principles. Enables progressive change within the communities, gender justice debates. We see that within different religious groups, between different social groups as well, that people from south, like the Nair community that is there, we have seen that in case of Garo, Khasi, Jaintia communities that exist in the Meghalayan state, these and some other tribal communities, they practice matrilineal societies where women have a big say into the social affairs. They have a big say into the decision making. So what happens that there are differences with respect to gender justice as well into the country. Next thing is prevent majoritarian dominance. So when majoritarianism rises, it comes at a cost of at a cost of insecurity among certain communities, certain religious and cultural communities. They might feel that they are being discriminated against, they are being left out. So it strikes at the core of this idea of majoritarianism only. Okay. We have a judicial backing of that it engages very contextually rather than any strict separation. As Arbomai case, we have also discussed Shaira Bano case of 2017 as well. So this was the significance. Next, we have again the issues and criticism. I think you would be getting an idea as to how we have to analyze a particular topic. First, you discuss the concept, then you elaborate the concept, then you discuss its significance, then you criticize it, then the way ahead, and we conclude it. So the first criticism is selective intervention concerns. Again, we see that the question talks about contextual engagement, but there are allegations. There will always be allegations because of the huge diversity that exists in India, that some sections of the society or people might feel that they have been discriminated against. So it is this selective perception or selective nature that we see such a concern. Second is the politicization of religion. We have seen that for electoral gains, for vote bank politics, how religions they have been utilized to mobilize people and mobilize their electoral choices. So this is second concern. Third is legal inconsistencies, again, that the debates, they goes on, and we do not see any uniformity with respect to legal laws on certain principles of secularism upon which our model of secularism relies upon. Next is the limitations have been exposed, like Babri Masjid, that we see that whenever there is a communal tension that is going on in India, we somewhere feel that the model of secularism or the idea of secularism that we started with, it is getting challenged at some point. Okay. Next, again, would be, we have discussed the basic framework, that what reforms have to be there, institutional impartiality, that all the units of the state, like the police, the judiciary, the election processes, or other institutional things that goes on, they have to work in such a nature that they are not being partial or not being biased to any section of the society. Next is legal harmonization. This was again a criticism that was highlighted. It's a solution for the legal inconsistencies part. So gradual reforms should take into the society, both with respect to bringing some uniformity into the legal principles, and that into the personal laws, if that is possible. Next is the civic measures. We have already discussed that bringing together different communities, engaging them, having conclaves. There is a Kashi Tamil conclave that goes on, that goes every year, where people from the southern parts of the country, they travel to Banaras and different other places, and vice versa. So this cultural engagements, so the civic engagement that we are talking, which sort of removes the perceived differences that might exist into the minds of the people, that is taken care of. Next again is the the policy initiatives, like in form of welfare schemes that addresses the concerns of the different sections of society, especially the minorities, which always feel that they have been discriminated against. Sachar committee. So this was a committee that was formed in the 2007 or 8, or somewhere around that. So in which it highlighted that how the minority sections of this country, how they are at certain disadvantages. So it tried to have an evaluation upon the social realities. It tried to bring out certain issues that existed at that particular point of time. So this contextual engagement makes Indian constitution adaptive and inclusion. But again, there are two things to every policy, every idea. That one is the idea in itself, wherein we discuss all the core principles or the key principles of it. Second is that we see the implementation part of it. Okay, so though the idea in itself is very noble, but it will depend upon its application and implementation that we will see it becoming a success or not. Next, again, is a question which talks about that how secularism in India has not resulted in secularization of the society. Underlying social factors. Secularism denotes state neutrality towards religion, whereas secularization implies declining social influence of religion in absence. So there are two ideas. One, we have discussed secularism. Second is the idea of secularization. So secularization is more of a concept which discusses the degree or the level of role that religion or cultural or religious social institutions, practices and customs play into the day-to-day lives of the people. Let us take that if these religious and social cultural institutions, they are playing a big role, then there is less secularization that is there in society. So we can make a graph of it. What is secularization? And here we have role of religion or society, social customs, traditions. When this will rise, there will be less secularization. So the graph would be in this manner. If there is high level of role, there will be less secularization. If the role is decreasing, let us say, then it is also decreasing. So you will see this, a graph of this nature. So it explains the idea of secularization within the society. I think this will make the picture more clear that the more the role of these institutions, the less is secularization in the society. The less is the role, the more is the secularization in the society. It is this idea only that has been discussed into the introduction. Next is the nature of secularism without secularization. Why? Because the question discusses that why secularism has not resulted into secularization of the society. So secularism talks about the separation between the state and the religion, and secularization talks about the reducing influence of these institutions into the day-to-day lives of the people or the society. So when we are discussing that why secularism as a concept after existed so long into India, it has not translated or materialized into secularization into the country. So why such a thing has happened? Because one is the state-led process, legal equality, but does not mandate social change. So there, the idea that we have discussed that there exist certain legal inconsistencies into the country, it is because of this that secularism, it has not survived and not resulted into the secularization, because it is largely a state-led process. And certain realities of this society, we have seen that in case of India, that certain, despite existence of certain legal principles, we see that those changes, they have not taken place at the societal level. So it is as a result of this that there exists a gap between the state and the social realities, as a result of which there has not been secularization that have taken place into the society. Next is the persistence of religiosity, that there is high level of religious participation. We have already discussed that Indian society, religion have a great impact upon the thoughts, perceptions and lives of the people into our country. So this, despite existence of modern laws, institutions that promote the ideas of secularization, because of huge participation that takes place, this thing has taken a hit. Underlying social factors. So this is trying to ask you analyze underlying social factors. So it has clearly asked you that what are the social factors because of HS. First is embedded social structures, that religion is so integrated there in form of caste, concept, daily life, that religion guides almost all sorts of activities of the people. Second is identity politics, that the politics of such a nature that it promotes religious attributes and religious institutions to have certain control upon the lives of the people. So it is for electoral gains that this thing have persisted more. Next is the socioeconomic insecurities, that certain minority sections or certain marginalized groups of the society, they always feel that if they adopt practices which are not their original practices, or which are concepts which are alien to their practices, customs and traditions, they might be at certain disadvantages. So it is these insecurities that exist at the core of it. And we as a society, if we want to move towards greater degree of secularization, we have to address these issues. Next is the cultural continuity. It remains very central to the human life in India, despite the modern changes that have taken place. We have talked that with respect to the modern institutions, modern laws that have come into place. Now the modern lifestyles, despite having those modern lifestyles, we all know that the degree of urbanization that has taken place into the country, it is huge. Despite that, people are having, the lives of the people are having a great control from the social traditions and practices. Despite living into the metro cities, many of the life choices of the people, they are seen to be impacted from the social traditions they belong to. So it is this cultural continuity. Next is the urban paradox. So we see that in the current times, there's the modernization that is taking place. Hand in hand, there are certain religious identities which are getting consolidated despite those changes. So it is because of this as well. Next, a more important aspect is the modern media and technology that have largely impacted the lives of the people. That how social media, it amplifies and polarize the different concepts. What are the consequences of it? Again, limited social transformation, weakening of the fraternity, that different groups will not engage constructively with each other. There will be policy changes with respect to the implementation of policies, that uniform policies will not be implemented. What reforms can be taken place? Promote constitutional morality. The idea of constitutional morality, inclusive development, education reforms, institutional neutrality. So we have discussed these ideas again and again, that how if we are targeting a change, that change has to travel and transverse across the sections of the society. It will travel at the individual level with respect to people being aware and people being educated about certain things. It has to exist at the societal level, where the society is ready to accept certain changes that are necessary for the progression and development of the society. At national level, the institutions are of such a nature that they are so strengthened that when these changes have to be brought in, they are so strong and so disciplined about it. So these institutional changes have to also take place. The legal changes, it also have to take place. So it is an amalgamation of all these factors that we could see the secularization increasing into the society. Again, the conclusion that how, despite having modern concepts, the social realities, they are so strong into the country, and advancing inclusive development and civic values is essential. So it is given that when you are writing a conclusion part, you have to discuss the idea that how the modern inclusive, because it is the perceived insecurities into the minds of the marginalized sections, that they feel that they would be left out from the developmental process if they do not stick to their original traditions and practices. So we have to remove those fears from the mind of the people. Okay. So this is question which talks about the role of judiciary, that judiciary has played a decisive role in shaping the contours of secularism in India. So how that happens, that Indian secularism implies equal respect for all religions with state intervention to ensure reform and equality. So primarily this question will talk about that how judiciary as a unit or judiciary as an institution, how it has shaped the contours of Indian secularism. So how it has shaped the basic structure doctrine that was seen in the S.R. Bomai case, declared secularism as a basic feature, allowed dismissal of governments acting against it. So this can be taken as a ground upon which the government's strict action can be taken against the government in power. Essential religious practices, we have seen that in case of Shirur Mutt case, which was around 1951 or 52, I guess. You can clarify it once. So it is this judgment which brings in the idea of the essential religious practices. We have seen that the Shirur Mutt case distinguishes essential versus non-essential practices, reform versus religious freedom balance, Indian Young Lawyers Association versus State of Kerala. So basically we are discussing the different judicial pronouncements which have shaped the idea of secularism in India. So we will take the example of different judicial cases and what changes that they have brought in. We have discussed about S.R. Bomai case, we have discussed about Shirur Mutt case. Now we are discussing about IYLA versus State of Kerala, where it upheld the gender equality over exclusionary practices, minority rights. TM Pai Foundation case, it was again an important case. Second, third, fourth judicial pronouncement. Safeguard minority educational institutions. So if you take 4 to 5 examples of different cases, you will be able to see that the question, the main body of the question is largely addressed, because we have to discuss that what role does judiciary have played into it, and we are seeing that. Okay, what is the significance of judiciary playing a role? That it strengthens the idea of constitutional morality, it balances pluralism and reform, that allows intervention without negating religious freedom. So we have said this, that it will help people exercise their rights, and also it will keep the government in power. So the institution will not overpower the will and the rights of the people. So it is judiciary, the institution of judiciary, that particularly ensures this particular thing. Okay, checks on majoritarianism, that how religion is not misused in the realm of governance, and how the institutions can be more and more partial. So basically the judiciary keeps a track of it. Okay, issues and criticism, judicial overreach ke concerns, we have seen that what is essential religious. So it's a big debate in itself again, that judiciary can intervene, but sometimes it is perceived to be an intervention of certain degree, that how can it define what are not the essential religious practices. So there are certain principles based upon which the judiciary decides whether a practice is essential or not essential. But when we are criticizing and evaluating a particular thing, then we bring in certain sense of accountability with respect to the judiciary as well, that based upon what premises a particular practice is supposed to be declared to be essential or non-essential. Okay, inconsistency in judgments, we have seen that there were certain judgments which have gone against the spirit of the judgments that were largely there. Implementation gaps, that is a perennial problem with respect to the changes that would have taken place but have not taken place because of the implementation gaps. Okay, what reforms are needed? That there have to be clear guidelines with respect to judiciary. There have to be an institutional synergy, that judiciary does not act into isolation. It is all the units of the governance or the government which should act in a synergic and cohesive manner, that they are able to design principles upon which these ideas are conducted or governed. Okay. Promotes awareness. Again, we have discussed that whenever you are discussing a particular thing, move from the lower rungs to the higher rungs, or higher rungs to the lower rungs. That education and awareness among people which acts at the civic level, it has to be promoted, and laws also have to be promoted. So all these things, when they'll come together, a big social change could be seen. Conclusion, you can take reference to certain articles from the Constitution. So 51A, it says that judiciary has been central in defining and defending secularism, though challenge remains in balancing faith and reform. So again, that you can briefly give certain hopeful suggestions as to how this thing can be improved. Uniform Civil Code represents most contested side of Indian secularism. So we have discussed that earlier points. We were discussing the idea of UCC as a solution to some of the legal inconsistencies that are seen. Okay. Now we are seeing that how UCC represents most contested side of Indian secularism. So in modern times, when we are talking about Indian secularism, UCC have evolved as a front which attracts most of the attention. Okay. UCC, envisaged under Article 44, seeks a common set of personal laws for all citizens. It represents a key tension within Indian secularism between equality and cultural autonomy. Okay, so the directive principles of state policy, which are basically considered to be as of guiding nature when it comes to making laws in India. So UCC is one such principle which has been included into the Constitution from the very initial, as to how it can evolve the lives of the people, especially with respect to promoting certain principles into the social, cultural and religious spheres which are conducting or guiding the lives of the people. So why UCC is a contested site? So we have talked about UCC in the introduction. In the main body, first dimension, that why most contested site. Why it is the most contested site? Equality versus identity. Because UCC promotes gender justice, but communities view it as we have discussed that how minority or marginalized sections of the society, they perceive certain changes to be against them. And UCC is one such principle which indicate or which hints towards bringing about a great degree of uniformity with respect to the laws, with respect to the principles into the conduct of day-to-day lives of the people. So it is because of this that people perceive it as an attack against their own identities. They perceive it as a threat to their identities. Okay. Plural legal system. Why? So there are different personal laws that exist as a result of which UCC has become a contested site. That different religious social groups, they have their own methods of governing their lives. So when this principle of UCC it comes into picture, these communities contest and confront this particular idea. So they have their own personal laws which indicates towards the diversity that exists into the country. So UCC basically challenges this framework, and it is as a result of this challenge that is put up before these religious communities that they are perceiving it as a challenge against their identities. Political contestation. Debate often framed through majoritarian versus minority. So the understanding of UCC has also lacked in certain senses, because we have only seen this, that it will bring uniformity. We have to expand the ambit of our discussion with respect to secularism also, that it is not only a narrative against majority or the minority. We have to bring that confidence into the lives or the minds of the minority sections which are perceiving it as a threat against them. So it is not a threat, it is something that tries to evolve our society in such a manner that the elements of friction or communal tension that exist at this point of time, they are reduced to a greater extent. So we have discussed that why it is a contested site. Now we will see what are the societal perspectives. So we will see different views that how this idea of UCC, it has it has become a contested site of Indian secularism. From the societal perspective, we see that UCC promotes the idea of gender justice, reforms that are needed in personal laws. We have seen these things. Minority rights perspective, fear of cultural homogenization and erosion of original identity. So we have seen that again, these communities, they are fearing certain things. Reform within communities, demand for gradual internal reforms rather than imposed uniformity. So this is a big aspect again, that certain communities which are not liking the idea of UCC and which are saying that if you want to bring those changes, if you want to bring those reforms into the societies, then why to impose an umbrella framework within which all the communities will fall? Why not make such a system that you are reforming the societies or the cultural groups from within? Let us say there exist 3 cultural groups into the society. So the idea of UCC talks that there will be certain laws and principles which will guide the conduct of all these 3 communities. But certain communities within them are saying that why to bring this umbrella? Just bring in the changes that are needed within these communities only. Okay. Regional variations are there. Goa Civil Code cited as model, yet with exceptions. So there are regional variations that a large part of the country is still not under the ambit or the principles of UCC that we have discussed. What is the significance of it? It promotes equality. It aligns with the constitutional articles that promote equality of 14, 15. Strengthens secularism, modernization of the society. So UCC as a concept, when we discuss about it, it has certain advantages that are there. So first we have discussed as to why it is the most contested site. Then we are seeing as to what advantages, what dividends does it bring to the society. We have seen that it promotes equality, strengthens the idea of secularism, and modernization of the society. Again, this was very natural that we will be discussing certain issues. Again, the idea of perception bias, social resistance, complex diversity, that people are perceiving it to be very differently. There are different social realities and social complexities that exist into the Indian society. So these are considered to be some of the challenges in the evolution of the idea of secularism. Reform measures, gradual approach, consensus building, that how this idea can be promoted further. We will see that the approach has to be very gradual. A consensus has to be built. So this is very important, that whenever a change has to be brought in, we have talked about civic engagement, but this thing is also very important, that if you want to bring a change into a society, you will have to bring together the different cultural groups are there on the table, discuss with them, build a consensus with them that these are the changes that are needed or the need of the hour, and they needs to be brought up at this point of time. And it is this consensus building which will reduce most of the challenges that would be there. People will not have their biases. They will not confront or resist the institutions. So the administrative cost of implementation of such measures, it will be reduced significantly. Gender sensitive reforms, prioritize equality across all religions. So it will promote such ideas. Judicial guidance is also needed from time to time. It is not that we make certain principles and we forget everything after that. We have to evolve this idea. Okay. This is the conclusion part. Core dilemmas. It reflects the dilemmas of Indian secularism of balancing equality with diversity. A consultative, gradual approach is needed, which is based in the constitutional morality, which is based upon building consensus into the society. So we'll briefly discuss this. You have already discussed this idea. So is resistance to UCC rooted more in identity anxiety than in constitutional principles? So we will see that how the concept of UCC, it is when it is evolving into the society, it is more of an identity anxiety in large parts of the society rather than based into the constitutional principles that promotes equality, in the constitutional principles that give confidence to the different sections of the society. Rather, it is creating certain sense of anxiety into the society. So UCC under 44 aims to ensure uniform personal laws across religions. Its resistance reflects a complex interplay between constitutional values of equal and societal concerns. So again, this idea is only. It is just that we have framed a different question and seeing it in a different light. So it is this, that we have to learn certain basic principles or certain concepts of a particular topic, and after a point the questions would be molded in different ways. We have to learn to deal with the basic things that we have understood. So we have seen that how UCC, when it is coming, it is creating tensions of identity, that their original identities, they would be eroded, they would be at a certain disadvantage. So it is these fears that are taking place in the minds of the people, rather than the confidence that the constitution should have brought, that the institutions would work in a partial manner, that the institutions will work in a fair manner, and the implementation of these principles, which it may be looking as to be of uniform nature, but it will include in itself the very ideas of the diverse realities that exist at the grassroots level. Identity anxiety as a major source of resistance. So we will divide this question, that how identity anxiety, it is acting as a resistance for bringing up of UCC. It is bringing cultural insecurity and certain communal tensions. They have also amplified this fear within certain communities, that how there can be turns where certain attitudes or certain things of majoritarianism that might take place. So it is these insecurities within these cultural groups that exist. Political framing also, that sometimes statements by political leaders for electoral gains or vote bank politics, we have seen that certain issues have surfaced into the country. So we have to take care of all these things. Okay. Constitutional concerns क्या है इस चीज के पीछे? That we see that freedom of religion, personal law seen as integral to religious practice. Pluralism in secularism. Indian model supports diversity, not strict uniformity. That there are certain constitutional ambiguities that also exist. There are certain gaps with respect to the implementation of the laws. There exist certain gaps with respect to the legal inconsistencies that we see at the level, national level. Federal and cultural diversities across the regions, they complicate the uniform application of these principles. So we have discussed, divided the question into two parts. First is that how this is resistance in form of identity anxiety. Second is constitutional principles. Then we have seen that we can critically analyze this thing as well, that overlap of identity and constitutional arguments. That we have seen that certain challenges that exist at the grassroots level, with respect to the perception of the idea of UCC, they are not properly supplemented with the constitutional confidence that should have been there. Second is the selective reform paradox, resistance persists even where reforms enhance. So there again there exist that perceptional issues only, that reforms are taking place, that people might perceive it that reforms are taking place against them only. It is their religious practices that are targeted more than compared to some other community. Okay, so these issues might exist. Need for balance, that there is a need to balance the constitutional values of equality versus the cultural rights. So there is a need to bring that harmonization between people's own realities and something that we are planning to bring in. So there has to be a certain degree of harmonization that should be there. What are the consequences of it? That there will be delays with respect to the legal reforms. So if these issues, basic issues of people, which is related to the anxiety of their identity, if they are not resolved, these principles will take more time. Second is communal polarization that might take place. So if these issues they persist for so long, then we might see that instead of resolving these issues, we might reach a stage that the polarization within the communities, it can significantly increase. Policy stagnation. If there is no consensus that is built within the communities, then we might see that the policies that were intended to bring out change and reforms within the society, that has not happened, and there is some sort of policy paralysis that have taken place. Okay. Then we will see what reforms could be there, that the approach have to be very gradual in nature. We have to be very consultative about it. Intra-community reforms, gender justice focus, judicial balancing. Okay. So when we are finding solution to a particular issue, then we will see it at all the levels, that the communities, their fears have to be taken care of. The engagement within the different communities, that have to also take place. There have to be reforms at the policy level, at the institutional level, that will take place. Okay. Next question is, majoritarianism poses a deeper threat to secularism than minority fundamentalism. So there are two concepts that have been highlighted: majoritarianism and minority fundamentalism. Majoritarianism is basically that when one community, religious, cultural or social community, when it have a greater role greater role and control over the lives of the rest of the communities, it is perceived to be an idea of majoritarianism. What is minority fundamentalism? That certain minority communities, they might be very rigid and strict about their original ideas, original concepts, traditions, practices. They would be very strict about them. So it could be that idea. So how these ideas, so the question basically, it's an interesting question which talks about that how the idea of majoritarianism, it poses a deeper threat to the secularism rather than the minority fundamentalism. So the idea of secularism, which talks about let us say some kind of cohesion within the society. So how majoritarianism can cause a greater threat compared to the minority fundamentalism? Critically examine. We have to take care of these directive words. They basically decide the direction of our answers. Introduction, we'll talk about majoritarianism, rigid principles within minority groups. Both challenges the framework, but their impact. So we have to be very balanced with respect to, even if the question talks about that majoritarianism is having a great impact, we will try to frame our answer in such a manner that majoritarianism is also having an impact. However, the minority fundamentalism that exists at the societal level in some of the pockets, it is also impacting the secularism idea into the nation. So we'll divide the question into two: how majoritarianism is seen as a threat, that control over the state power, that majorities they take take control over the political power, erosion of neutrality, that when majority would be participating into the decision making roles, they would be biased against the minorities that exist. Next could be normalization of the exclusion, that when things act as a greater level with respect to the majority communities deciding most of the things, they would think that the exclusion that has taken place for the minorities, it is very natural. And this normalization is a bigger threat because it brings in certain, I would say, certain elements of ignorance and something that is not promoting the idea of harmonization, which was the basic fundamental that we were discussing. Next part would be that how minority fundamentalism is posing a threat, that intra-community rigidity, that certain aspects of the practices or traditions in certain minority communities, they are so rigid about it that they resist any kind of change that might take place. So it is the intra-community rigidity that can be a big sort of challenge. Social fragmentation. So if the communities, they separate themselves from the larger part of the society, then fragmentation will take place into the society. Society would be divided on different lines, social lines, cultural lines, or other things as well. Security concerns can be there, that radical elements might creep into the society. We have seen that in case of Jammu and Kashmir, that certain fundamentalist groups, certain radicalist groups, they have promoted this venom into the minds of the youngsters as well, that it became very difficult to bring that social harmony into those regions. So it is one thing, critical asymmetry of impact, that when both these things they come into play, the impact that was supposed to be there, it is very asymmetrical in nature. It has wider institutional reach while is more localized. So the upper control that exists, it is more in case of the majority communities. However, with respect to the minorities, we see that the impact at the local level, it is very high. So if there is a divergence between the two at the local level and at the higher level, then it will be very difficult to bring that change. Mutual reinforcement. Each feeds the other, deepening communal polarization. So we cannot blame any part of the society to be responsible, to be solely responsible for these things. We will see that there is a difference, that each one of the feed them, that when majority communities, they exercise some majoritarian tendencies, then the minorities feel insecure about it, and they go into their own cocoon of saving their original identities, and they become more rigid about them. Violation of constitutional morality. So the biggest cost of this majority versus minority is that both of them are divided based on their own ideas, and we are seeing that constitutional principles are the biggest cost that is there. What are the consequences of it? We'll see that communal polarization will be there. Democratic principles, institutions, they will weaken. Marginalization will further. And all the principles and ideas that we were discussing, it will have a big hit. What reforms could be there? Judicial reforms, institutional neutrality, inclusive development, civic measures. We have discussed these things repeatedly. So there's no point in repeating all these things again and again. It is just that when you are planning, when you are writing something, you have to write it at all the levels, at the societal, national, at the individual level, at the institutional level, at the level of society as well. Okay. I think you have started understanding that how this thing is working. That first you are discussing the concept, then you are discussing the key aspects of the concept, that what are the key features of the concept, then you are discussing what is the significance of this concept, then you are critically analyzing the concept in the sense that you are evaluating it it with respect to what are the limitations of the concept and how this concept could be improved. So this is the basic structure that we have been following, and in the end we conclude it with a hope. So this is the last question with respect to Indian secularism, that how Indian secularism failed to prevent communal violence despite a strong constitutional framework. So we have seen that the biggest fallout of the secularism not working properly is the communal tensions that exist in the society. That how we have seen that as a result of these communal tensions, many times we have seen that violence have taken place, and why that violence have taken place, and what is the role of Indian secularism into that how failure of secularism is resulting into these communal tensions. We'll discuss the idea of Indian secularism, that it requires state neutrality and respect for all regions. So you can start with this basic thing, then that how this has failed, how failure to prevent communal violence. Politicization, this is the biggest reason we know that the mobilization of people on religious and communal lines for electoral and political gains, this thing has further polarized the society and have led to conflicts between the people. People are divided on different lines, and they tend to fight on certain issues. Weak law enforcement, that the enforcement of laws, it has taken place at a very sluggish pace. We have seen that the laws have not been implemented at a rate at which they are designed or they were intended to create that impact. Socioeconomic inequalities, marginalization fuels insecurity. We have seen that how the marginalization of the small communities, it further increases their rigidities. We have discussed the concept of minority fundamentalism earlier, that how these communities, when you breach that natural threshold of their tolerance, they would reach to such a stage. They will reach a stage wherein the communities will feel insecure about their own religious traditions. They will feel insecure about the erosion of their original and natural identities, which is basically promoting the idea of minority fundamentalism. Next thing is the historical legacies, how the memories from the partition and others, they have promoted this idea of the communal tension that have taken place into the society, and how this the one modern aspect that is there with respect to media and technology that have started playing into. So as a result of this, what have started is that the communal conflicts, whenever there is a communal conflict in some sections of the society or the country, we see that there is lots of misinformation or fake information that goes into the social medias, which feeds into the minds of the people, and we see that these are perceived differently by different sections of the society, and it is costing the idea of secularism that we have intended to promote. Okay. Next is the administrative lapses. We have seen that how the lapses within the institutions and the implementation of the principles of secularism with respect to be it UCC or others, that how the administrative lapses, they have contributed into this particular direction. We have seen that the minority communities, they are showing certain frictions as a result of this. We see that certain minority institutions which might fear that their identities are put into danger because of the principles of uniformitarianism that are being brought up in form of laws. So there is an administrative cost that would be inflated as a result of this, which have to be taken care of. Moving on to the next section, which talks about the limitations, structural limitations of the concept of secularism. We have seen that the question basically discusses that how secularism, the model of secularism, have failed in preventing the communal tensions into the society. So we see that what are the limitations of this very idea of secularism. First is the state-centric approach. We know that the idea, though it was embedded into the cultural heritage of our country only, these principles of tolerance which secularism basically talks about, but we have seen that in the modern times, the idea of secularism, which basically talks about a separation between the state and the religion, it has permeated basically to the governance institutions and governance frameworks only. The people, over a period of time, we have seen that how the concept of secularism have evolved into the country, but it does not ensure the societal secularization. We have seen that there is a gap between the principles, the concept which exists at the principle level, that it talks about certain ideas, and at the stage of implementation, which is basically the idea of secularization, that how the role have reduced within the lives of the people, how the role of religious practices, traditions, and institutions have reduced into the lives of the people. So this is one, that it is a state-centric approach. Second is the legal pluralism, that there is a gap that exists with respect to the personal laws reinforcement and with the identity divisions that exist between different religious groups and communities. Implementation deficit. So this is one of the biggest reason because of which the whole framework of secularism has been called into question, that the implementation that exists at the level of the laws, that exist at the level of the institutions, it has created a certain degree of mistrust into some of the marginalized sections, as a result of which the effective implementation of this concept, it has not materialized properly. What are the consequences of it? Human right violations, social fragmentation, economic setbacks. So the development today, if we connect it to the modern idea of modern development, we will see that these things have taken a hit. What could be the reforms? We'll briefly talk about judicial reforms, policy and administrative reforms, regulation of hate speech. This is important because of a modern element to it. Inclusive development, civic initiatives. So then we will conclude it by connecting it to the idea of development by 2047 and with harmony and justice.